Okay, everybody, thank you for coming. My name is Theron Sturgis, and I'm here to do a presentation that's going to help people hopefully feel a little bit safer, a little more confident, and talk to you about how to become stronger through the practice of self-defense. My chief objective today is to teach everybody how to predict, prevent, and avoid a violent encounter, but also to explain to you how the practice of self-protection or self-defense can lead to a healthier, happier lifestyle. All right, that may be accessible by some, but there's definitely something for everybody to take away today from this. And if you have anybody in your family or loved ones that has ever encountered violence before, then you know what a serious topic this is. I think it's something that a lot of people see in passing on the news, kind of raises our general anxiety, and then we kind of just file it and let it go. But there are some things that I'm going to talk about today that will help everybody to understand violent crime a little bit better, everything from mass shootings to personal assaults. And part of my motivation for doing this is here in Springfield recently we've had over 6 rapes or attempted sexual assaults downtown since June. And if we had had 6 murders in that same period of time, everybody would have heard about it, okay? So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what I call the ABCs of self-defense. And after I do that, I'm going to explain what's called the victimization triangle, because if you understand that, you understand a good portion of the self-protection model, which is 90% awareness and avoidance. Then we're going to get into a discussion of a little bit of physical tactics that you could use personally or teach someone in your family. And we want to do a little bit of a risk assessment and analysis. Then I'll talk a little bit about combat techniques, because that seems to be what a lot of people are interested in. What would I actually do in an emergency? And I'll share you some stories about how intuition and fear can be turned into a guardian and a guide, and can be one of your best tools for survival, but also to lead you to hopefully a happier, healthier lifestyle. And then after that, I'll kind of sum up how to defeat what I call the 7 invisible enemies, which are something that I think we all face in today's society, and how my practice of martial arts and self-defense fits into that. And that'll pretty much be hitting the 3 different aspects, mind, body, and self-defense, that I try to incorporate into what I do on a regular basis. So let's get started with the ABCs of self-defense and talk a little bit about this. I guess we don't need this update here, so let's see if I can find that. Wow, that's fast mouse.
Yeah, it's horrible.
So this is kind of based on one of my presentation overviews. Aggressive driving and road rage is ranked as a top highway safety issue. I just had a road rage incident on the way here. Somebody was in my blind spot, and I guess they were really upset that I started to change lanes, had my signal on early, but they got really upset. And those situations with the wrong personality type can really devolve into a violent situation. Just about a mile from my martial arts school, someone was shot a few months ago in a road rage incident. And the key is that I think a lot of people are not taught how to de-escalate once a situation starts getting out of control, and people make a lot of silly mistakes, like getting out of their car, they confront people, they start yelling, and they add to the emotional momentum, and it can get out of control really quick. That could have been a murder, it could have been a homicide, but fortunately the person survived. But I'm just drawn into, you know, in one sense, I look at the overall scope of violence and see that society is generally safer and that in general violent crime is coming down. But I get reports every week of someone that is raped or shot or beat up. Every 4 hours in this country, a woman is murdered by her boyfriend or her husband. And every 8 hours, a man is killed during a domestic violence incident, usually, most of the time, because a woman is proactively defending herself by killing her partner. That's a pretty serious issue. Violence is something that affects us all. It's expensive, it's psychologically damaging, it affects the economy. And 2 million US residents experienced violent crime while they were working on duty. I think we all experienced that about a week ago when we had the shooting on live television, when a couple reporters just went to work on a regular day, and all of a sudden they encountered somebody that was violent. What could have been done to prevent that? Could they have avoided it? How fearful should we be? You know, there used to be kind of a catchphrase in popular culture about someone going postal. But the fact of the matter is that the post office doesn't have a higher than average incident of workplace violence than, say, IBM or any other large multinational corporation. So with that in mind, we're all potential victims. And it's something that we have to realize. I know a lot of people are more afraid of sharks or even an aggressive dog than they are of other humans, but the fact remains that humans kill more humans than any other animal on the planet. We're very good at it. And so it's pretty easy to avoid a shark attack. Just don't go into the water. But humans are tricky. We are more complex. Our behaviors are more subtle. And sometimes we forget to use our instinct and our intuition. And that's what I want to tune everybody into today. So let's go a little bit into the more of the overview. 90% of self-defense is awareness and avoidance. All right, the exciting part, I think what draws a lot of people to me, is that they want to learn how to fight. And I think that that's important because I think learning how to physically defend yourself helps to fuel your ability to assess danger. You get into the self-protection mindset. It helps to build your physical confidence, which can help you to de-escalate a situation because you know what to do in the extreme emergency that it gets physically violent. Plus, I think everybody should know how to fight. It's kind of like you should know how to run, fight, swim, climb. It's a way of exploring your ability as a human being. For thousands of years, humans had to fight to survive. Back during the Civil War, there were some parts of our country where out of 100,000 people, there were 200 murders in that population per capita per year. Now we're at like 5 to, in a big year, 9 people out of 100,000. That's great, but it's still pretty high. And there's a lot more sexual assaults and physical violence, robberies and threats of violence and things that occur. And we see things in the media all the time with mass shootings and mass murders that get us really, you know, kind of anxious about it. So a lot of awareness and avoidance strategies depend on us learning more about the subject of violence so we can put our fear in the proper place. What happens when we have a mass casualty incident or mass shooting, or like what happened with the reporters a couple of weeks ago with the on-air live murder, is that we see it over and over and over again. And that incident is extremely rare. The context was very specific to their situation. And yet what the media does is it falsely informs our fear and our intuition, just like 9/11 does. I mean, we have a terrorist attack in this country about, you know, on average, like once every 200 years from a foreign, you know, country. We've had a lot more domestic terrorism if you look at the numbers. So we can go around and be afraid of things that we shouldn't really be afraid of. You know, the old example is you're more likely to get hit by lightning than, you know, eaten by a shark. But it's pretty easy to avoid being eaten by a shark. It's fairly easy to avoid violent encounters if you take simple precautions, but sometimes even simple precautions give way to chaos and just random chance. So that's where the self-protection mindset comes into it. I break it down into these 3 ABCs of self-protection. Easy to remember, and it helps you to kind of inform your intuition and your knowledge base about violent crime. Acceptance that it can happen to you is key. There's so many, especially men, that don't believe that it can happen to them, that they could be a victim of it. Awareness of your surroundings, of your internal environment. Are you adrenalized? Have you been drinking? Are you tired? That's hugely helpful in determining how susceptible or how vulnerable you are. Avoidance strategy is key. I think this is really important for some men, especially young men, because they can be lured into a fight based on ego, pride, especially if alcohol is involved. There are a lot of bar fights that end in death or brain damage because somebody pushes somebody. They fall back, they trip, they hit the back of their head, and the person either dies or is in brain damage or coma. This happened in California not too long ago at a baseball game. There were 2 rival teams. They got into a shoving match. One push. Guy fell down, hit the back of his head. Maybe there was a 1-punch exchange too, but it was a very short encounter. Very violent. No reason for it to be violent, but that trip and fall ruined that guy's life. It ruined probably several people's lives because the entire family of the victim, the entire family of the assailant, now the assailant's being prosecuted, going to jail for a long period of time. It's involving the court system, it's involving finances, it's involving the psychology of the family. One violent incident can affect not just the 2 people involved, but really hundreds of people around them, all the people that they work with, all the people that depend on them. So it kind of has this ripple effect. Not to mention the women that I've worked with that have been raped, usually in their youth, usually between the ages of 12 and 24 are your highest incidences of sexual assault. And these women carry those scars of violence with them their whole life. So even if you win a fight as a male, a lot of times you lose because you end up in jail or sued. And so avoiding violence is obviously one of the best strategies. So B stands for buddy, meaning avoid isolation, try to be with friends. When you're isolated, that's usually when you're in the most danger. Your best friend is distance. Try to be distant from an oncoming violent situation. If you have somebody that's emotionally or mentally disturbed approaching you downtown, maybe they're just asking for money, or maybe they're using a distraction technique so their friend can come up around behind you, you have to be a little bit aware of how to set a physical boundary, like, hey, close enough. So that's something that I teach. And then C is for control, combat, and confidence. These are kind of the physical training aspects of martial arts or self-defense. That's martial arts designed for self-defense. Not all martial arts is specifically designed for self-defense anymore. It might be for sport, recreation, exercise, and those are all great benefits. But if you want to really learn self-defense, you don't need to get a black belt. You don't need to train for years. You can learn in a few hours some basics that you can remember your whole life. And I'm going to teach you guys some of that stuff today because I think it's interesting to people. Like, how would I defeat somebody that outweighs me by 100 pounds? What would I do if somebody got me on the ground? What if somebody pulled a gun and held it to my head and said, get in the car right now? What would I do if I was carjacked? You know, what would I do if I was robbed at gunpoint at an ATM? These are things that happen. They happen in our area. And you want to reduce your chance of being a victim in that situation. So that's what we're going to focus on. Now, as we go into this awareness concept, this crime or victimization triangle is probably, if there was one takeaway from today's event, I would say this is probably it. It's a simple image. It's easy to remember, and it's something that you can teach the young men and women in your family. I think sexual assault is often kind of pegged as a women's issue. I really think it's a community issue for all the reasons I outlined. It affects so many people. It has this ripple effect. It lasts for years psychologically. It lasts for years economically. And so we want to teach young people, one, men how to respect women and treat them with respect, and two, we want to teach women how to defend themselves against men. You know, unfortunately, it's an issue that they have to deal with. In our society today, for a man to say no is the end of a conversation. For a woman to say no, it's often the beginning of a negotiation, okay? Whether it's dating, whether it's other situations where somebody's trying to persuade you to drink alcohol, you know, especially for young people that are dating and partying and whatnot. So that's something to kind of teach people, and especially women, the confidence to not be nice, and the awareness that nice is a strategy. I often say, let's look at the word nice and take the N off of it. We realize that people are usually nice when they want something. Nice is a social strategy. It's not an innate characteristic like this person is tall and nice. Nice is not something that is inherent to who you are. It is a strategy. And this is what leads to what I call healthy paranoia, having a little bit of skepticism, a little bit of awareness. And it reminds me of a story of someone who was flying on an airplane, and he was a violence expert. He was an expert on preventing violence, and he noticed that there was this guy. He had tight jeans, kind of well muscled, filled out his shirt, closer to 50, and he was sitting next to a girl, maybe 16. He was drinking some alcohol, and he just kind of slid up next to her with a big smile and said, "Hey, going to Chicago?" And what he was really saying was, "Are you going to Chicago?" And he engaged her in conversation, and she started to kind of enter into the conversation. He slid a little drink of alcohol. He's like, "Hey, you're traveling alone. You can do what you want to do." And she was like, "No." He continued to persuade her. There's that negotiation. He slid it over. He's like, "You're an independent young woman traveling the world. What's wrong with having to drink? You can do whatever you want." Slid it over there. And then he started using certain techniques, like asking her questions without asking a question. So he said, "Well, you know, I'm hitting the airport here really soon. I don't have anybody to pick me up." And she's like, "Yeah, me too." He asked her a question and extracted information without asking a direct question. And after engaging her in some conversation and finding some more information about her, finding that she was not meeting somebody at the airport, that she was traveling alone, he got up to use the restroom. And this expert at violent prevention kind of leaned over and said, you know, I'd like to talk to you for a second. And he noticed that she immediately got nervous. It's like her intuition and her fear was kind of shifted the wrong way. This guy that's trying to actually help her, she was more guarded against than this guy that was trying to extract information from her. She didn't see the context. She didn't understand the situation. She didn't have that healthy paranoia, and she didn't have that personal awareness or that self-protection mindset that we just want to have running as like a subroutine always going in the back of our minds. And because of that, she was kind of resistant. And he said, look, I'm only going to tell you one thing. This is not a nice guy, and when you get to the airport, he's going to offer you a ride. Don't take it. So they got off the plane, and fortunately, he looked over and saw that they were having kind of a heated conversation. Obviously, the guy was trying to persuade her, and she was trying to step back. She was using the boundary strategy, just intuitively, trying to get away from this guy. And, you know, the hope is that she didn't go on that ride with him. So in seeing this crime triangle, we look at 3 different major factors that form the sides of the triangle. All right, not sure how that happened, but I'll come back here. Okay, right click isn't moving me back.
You gotta right click and then click back. Or yeah, that arrow down at the bottom left.
Ah, gotcha. That was weird.
It's also a touch screen, so if you do touch it, it will.
Oh, is that what happened? Yep. That's cool. All right. So it's kind of a smart screen. Very nice. A gesture towards it. So the 3 sides of the triangle that allow a physical assault to take place is we have to realize that most criminals don't want to get caught. So they're looking for an opportunity for isolation. The 2 most common places that women are attacked or assaulted are the grocery store parking lot and the office parking lot. Okay, women's restrooms are another big area for women to be attacked. You wouldn't expect a guy to be in there. You go to the mall, use the restroom, there's some guy in there, and now you're cornered. It's hard for people to hear, it's hard for people to see, and the only other people that are most likely to come in there are other women. And so isolation is a prime technique for criminals to prey. It's the same that tigers or lions use in the wild. Any predator is going to seek their prey. So if you can avoid being prey, being selected as that one antelope that lion wants to select out of the group, then you break the triangle. If you can avoid the predator by identifying and recognizing those danger signals that this guy's using nice as a strategy, that he's using charm, take the C off of charm, you have harm, that you realize that he's wanting something, that he's pushing an agenda, especially if he ignores a no. Something as simple, let me help carry your groceries, and you say no, and he enters into this negotiation period. What about, you know, it's okay to not be nice. It's okay to say, hey, I said no. What about no? Don't you understand? Make a scene. Call attention to yourself. Prevent the isolation from happening. And I'll tell you a couple stories, because a lot of times I explain this and people are like, well, I'm never alone. And then they'll go jogging, put in both headphones, loud music, and they'll just head down the nature trail. And this happened to a 17-year-old girl about 3 weeks ago here in Springfield. Did you guys hear about that? It was on the news. She was going jogging one of the nature trails. Kind of moderately busy day. She was having a good jog, and a guy grabbed her, pulled her into the woods. When 2 teenage boys heard her screaming for help, they came over, and you know, there was a woman raped on the beach during spring break recently, and there were well over 200 people around her. But what happens is there becomes a diffusion of social responsibility. You can be isolated in a group of people when everybody thinks that somebody's going to do something. If you're in a group of 30 people and you're choking, you're in more danger than if you're in a group of 3 people. Because out of 30 people, somebody's going to think, well, somebody here's a doctor, somebody's had first aid, somebody else besides me can help this person. And the same thing happens when people are physically assaulted at train stations or jogging trails. There may be people around 20 feet away, 10 feet away, and they're not offering aid because they don't know what to do, they haven't been trained, they're too afraid, they take no action, and the person is assaulted right there. And these 2 boys did the opposite. They did what a lot of people wouldn't do, is they tackled this guy. He had his pants down around his ankles. I mean, he was ready to physically assault this woman and rape her. And he'd already started throwing her to the ground, and they pulled him off, and they held him down until the cops got there. That's not usually the case. The guy was poorly trained, but imagine the attacker was poorly trained. He wasn't experienced. Imagine if he was successful this time. what would he have learned from that? How would he have improved his tactics and his ability to, for example, sit in a parking lot, such a prime area where you can sit and watch people? And there was an assault at a parking garage just a few miles from here last summer, and several women walked through the parking lot and weren't attacked. But the one woman who was walking through the parking garage looking at her phone, she was the one where the guy came up and he hit her, took her purse, grabbed her phone, and took off. Now, she got hit. She lost an $800 phone and her purse and all her credit cards, but that psychological scar of being physically assaulted, how's that going to affect her husband? How's it going to affect her boyfriend or people in her family? How's her father going to feel about it? How's her friends going to feel about it? You know, how's she going to live with that all the time? I mean, she's got to park in parking garages for the rest of her life. But what if she knew this crime triangle and recognized that somebody was observing her, that she was not paying attention to her environment, she was allowing herself to be isolated, and this gave opportunity, and she was also exhibiting prime prey behavior by not paying attention. When you look around and you're paying attention to your environment, you are going way down the list as far as what a criminal wants to select. They want to select somebody that doesn't look like they're going to fight back. They want to select somebody that doesn't look like they're paying attention. They want to look for a victim that's easy to get whatever it is they want, whether it's sexual assault, whether it's robbery. They want to get in and out and be gone so that they don't get caught. The other more violent strategy is to physically move you to a second location. So I've already decided, and I think you guys should think about this and make the decision, that if I'm carjacked, if somebody comes up to me with a gun and says, get in the car, I would rather fight there and get shot and be bleeding, or have a chance to crawl to somebody that has a cell phone and get help, rather than get in that car and be taken to a second location where somebody could do anything to me. Or, you know, I've talked to my wife about the same thing. So, you know, if you have to make a stand, it's better to do it in the first location where you encounter the potential violence. If somebody's wanting to take you to another location, that is really, it's almost 99% of the time a fatal crime scene. You know, it's a homicide crime scene. So I could talk, unfortunately, I could tell you many, many stories. And what's amazing is almost every example that I'm giving you guys today, it's not something that happened in New York City. It's something that happened here. Amanda Morton, 20-year anniversary, I think, right now. She was bumped by a car on the highway. She was getting ready to get off and go see her family. And she's like talking on the phone to her boyfriend. She said, well, this guy just bumped me. He's giving me insurance information. He seems really nice. She was 100 yards from a well-lit gas station. Instead, she got out of her car, and the control of her life passed from her to this other individual. And the guy that murdered and raped her and tortured her put her in his car, drove off to a hotel, and then he took her out in the woods and he killed her. And that happened just, you know, down the road. So this stuff happens. Fortunately, it doesn't happen every day here, but it happens every day somewhere in this country. And so that healthy paranoia, if you are in a situation where somebody hits your car, having that healthy paranoia to say, you know what if this is a trick? I'm isolated, I'm alone, I think I'd rather just call the police, I'll hand my information through the window. That could have saved her life. And I'm not blaming the victim here, it's just that people don't know. And a little bit of healthy paranoia goes a long, long way. But we want to inform our intuition, and that's the most important thing. So I'm going to tell you a story of something where it started to go really wrong, but the victim was able to use intuition in order to help rescue herself, which is kind of what we want. I think a lot of people freeze when they're being attacked. They kind of lock up. But if you think of a mother defending her young in the wild, or even a human mother defending her child, there's not a more dangerous animal on the planet. If you imagine defending yourself, you might think, I wouldn't know what to do. I have no idea. But then imagine somebody that you love on the ground, 20 feet away with somebody on top of them, trying to force themselves on them. What would you do? You would do anything. You would call for help. You would grab a chair, hit them on top of the head. One mother that was interviewed talked about how she came home and her daughter was sunbathing in the backyard, and a guy that was doing yard work in the area jumped over the 6-foot wood fence and was in the process of sexually assaulting her daughter when she got home. And she got on the guy's back, and she had taken a self-defense seminar, and she just remembered the 3 key targets: eyes, throat, groin. And she said that while she was defending her daughter, she was saying these targets out loud. his throat, groin. And she scratched his eye, she clawed his throat, and the guy got up and ran, took off, climbed over the fence. The cops got him a few blocks later, and he was pretty easy to identify because of his face, and she had DNA under her fingernails. She didn't have to fight back hard. She didn't have to knock him out. She didn't have to be Ronda Rousey, or a UFC fighter. She fought with enough resistance and caused enough commotion that it made the criminal nervous enough that he fled. And that's all I try to teach people is how to, avoidance is best, but if you are in a violent encounter or if you see one, there are things you can do. And I'm not saying that you always need to get physical. Calling for help is always the best thing. But criminals don't want to get caught. If we break any side of this triangle, if we eliminate isolation, if we do not exhibit target-like behavior, if we recognize predatory behavior, we can disrupt the opportunity for the criminal. So let's talk about a situation where there was I call it girls' night out. There was a group of mothers and daughters going to see Jurassic Park, right? So it's kind of ironic because here's a movie about ancient predators. And we think about humans, we don't really have the biggest claws or the biggest teeth or the strongest muscles, but we do have one advantage over every predator on the planet. And frankly, almost every predator on the planet fears us more than any other predator, and it's because of our brains. We can kill whales, we can kill lions, we can kill tigers, we can kill each other with great efficiency, and we do. And so recognizing how to defend yourself against a human, very difficult. There's no one physical strategy that works all the time. There's no one technique that works against 100% of the people 100% of the time. But there is one thing that you all possess right now that is all within you, that has nothing to do with what I can show you or teach you. But I can teach you to use it more because we put it on the back shelf. And Einstein has a famous quote about how our intuition is a sacred gift and our rationality is more like a servant. Intuition allows us to go from A to Z without getting all the letters in between. We don't have to know why we're afraid. We just have to recognize that we are. Perhaps we're worried, and I'll talk a little bit about the difference between real fear and worry in a little bit, but we have persistent thoughts. Sometimes even dark humor can be an indication that you are recognizing that something's off. The creeps, some people call it the creeps, hair standing up on your arms or your neck. We ignore it so often because we live in a rational world. We are slave to the servant of rationality rather than accepting this amazing evolutionary gift of fear, real fear, as a guardian, as a gift that says, right now I am getting, I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm getting some vibes here that are telling me to be nervous. I'm going to back out of the driveway. I'm not going to go in. My trash can is not always in the middle of the driveway like that. I'm going to back out and kind of look around the house and see oh, there's a broken window. I need to call the police. Sometimes you don't even know why you have to go home, but you feel like, man, I need to run home. I think I left something on the stove. And you go back home and the stove's off, but you forgot your briefcase that had an important something in it. So I think, it's been my experience that when I pay attention to intuition, it always not always tells me something that I think I need to know, but it almost always tells me something that I do need to know, if that makes sense. In other words, it doesn't always give me the information that I was expecting, but it gives me important information that I needed. And I think that's an important recognition. Intuition is the number one thing that I would teach and that I do teach for women's self-defense, for self-defense in general, and for martial arts. And intuition on a more positive application of life, your intuition can help guide your career path. It can help you experience life at a greater level of fulfillment, a greater level of wellness. This mother and group of mothers and daughters were waiting to get their tickets in this mother's night out. And she saw a guy in line who he didn't look, really out of the ordinary. He just seemed like a normal guy. But he had a t-shirt that said, "Fear the dark." He's wearing some sweatpants. And there was just something about him. She couldn't put her finger on it. Something about him that gave this mom the creeps. She had an 8-year-old daughter with her. She had parked a couple blocks away because she was going to go shopping later. And they went in, just before sunset to see the movie. And just waiting in line, the guy kind of saddled up next to her and said, "Hey, is this girls' night out? You guys seeing a movie together?" And she just kind of like, yeah, turned her shoulder, didn't want to engage him in conversation. Her intuition was alerted. Saw the movie, good movie. walked out, said goodbye to all of her friends. One of her friends offered to give her a ride to her car that was just 2 blocks away, and she's like, nah, I'm fine. You know, this is the 2000s, this is 2015, I have nothing to worry about. But then as soon as her friends left, she started getting upset. She started feeling anxious. So she and her 8-year-old daughter were walking to the car, and she, you know, we don't know if maybe out of the corner of her eye she saw something or noticed, but she kept thinking about the guy in the lobby. And she didn't see him around. She looked around. She didn't see anything that was making her feel this nervous. But she started walking really fast, and her 8-year-old daughter jokingly asked, "Is this a race?" And at that moment she said, "Yeah, that's great. This is a race. Let's go." And so they ran for the car. And while she was running, she created an action plan in her head. I'm going to get my daughter into the car. I'm going to come around to the car. I'm going to quickly get in the car, lock the doors, get the key in the ignition, and I'm going to take off. She had the key in her hand, and she kept saying to herself, the key, the key, the key, get the daughter in the car. And she was going over her action plan. And she got her daughter into the car, closed the door, and walked around the side. And the next thing that she remembers in retelling the story is that her feet were flying. She was sitting in the driver's seat, kicking. She was kicking so hard, she was making it impossible for this guy to grab her. And then she kept saying the key. And it wasn't till later that she thought, you know, I could have used that key to stab him in the eye to get away from this guy. But she didn't even realize till later, till after this had already happened, that she had used the key. And she jammed it in his eye. And she said, I would never want to blind somebody, but it was my daughter, you know. And she didn't realize that even though she had used the key, she had kind of said to herself, at least I only got him in one eye. I wouldn't want to blind somebody permanently, but she'd attacked him in both eyes. She had switched from being prey to a predatory mindset. In that moment, she was the mother grizzly protecting her cub. This guy made a mistake. He picked the wrong victim in that case. Bad target because she was willing to defend herself. And she got the key into the ignition and she took off. If she had been alerted to her intuition, if somebody had just told her to trust your gut, trust your instinct, she would have taken that ride. But fortunately, she trusted it enough that she did things that bought her enough time. It may not have gone that way. Fortunately, they ran to the car. Fortunately, she had the key. Fortunately, she was physically able to fight. Fortunately, she had identified a vulnerable target. So intuition, in that case, became her guardian. Fear became her protector. And that's something that I try to teach people is like, there's good fear, there's bad fear. It's more like there's real fear and there's worry. Worry and anxiety always occur in the presence of a non-immediate situation outside your immediate environment. It's outside the now. It's what possibly could happen. That's why the media influx of reports of violence, I think, terrify us so much, because we get inundated with plane crashes, and we know traveling on an airplane is one of the safest modes of travel to ever exist. But because we see that one plane crash occur 80 times in a 2-week period, your worry and fear of what could happen is not really protecting you. However, if you're at the airport and you notice that the captain maybe is looking a little tipsy, like he's been, you know, in the lounge too long, and you're like, you know what, I don't know if I want to get on that plane. That's a whole different thing. You know, seeing 9/11 occur, how many people have seen it 100 times or more? You know, we've all seen that it happened once, but we've all seen it hundreds of times. So it makes you anxious, but is that really educating your intuition? I mean, why do people slow down on the highway when they see an accident? They do it because we have an instinctive need. It's not just, I think, base curiosity. I think curiosity is an aspect of our intuition. Fear turns to fascination, and when fear turns to fascination, you start to look closely. Was this a dangerous intersection? Was this a young couple that was horsing around, drinking and driving? Was this somebody that was on their phone? I always want to know this stuff, and this is the stuff that's not reported in the news. There was a sexual assault. Was the person alone? What time did it occur? How did the guy introduce himself to her? Because almost all assaults or violent crimes, they occur after an interview of some sort. And the interview can be just as short as, hey, ladies night out? Seeing a movie together? That was an interview. He was sizing her up, just like two ancient gladiators that look at each other in the ring and see, how big is this guy? How tough is he? Can I take him? You know, the predator was sizing her up. The interview on the airplane story that I mentioned earlier, that guy was just looking at how vulnerable that 16-year-old is, going through a mental checklist of, can I get her alone? Is she with somebody? How easy is this going to be to pull off? Recognize that you're interviewed. Recognize that when somebody comes up to you and is talking to you for no reason, it can be a big thing. I'll tell you one more story about intuition, then I'll move on to the last two parts of my presentation. There was a woman, let's call her Kelly, and she had a couple cats, and she had a big grocery bag full of all kinds of groceries, and it broke open, and it bounced down the stairs of her apartment building, off her landing, and she heard an unfamiliar voice say, "I got it." And she didn't know why, but at that moment, she became extremely afraid. Now remember, real fear occurs in a real environment in the present moment. That's how you know it's actual fear, because something is alerting you at that moment in a real environment. So she waited for a second, and the guy came up the stairs, and he was holding the cans. He's like, "Here, let me help you with that bag. Let me help you get that into your apartment." She's like, "No, thanks." And he's like, "Oh, you know, what's wrong with me? Are you too good to let somebody help you?" Which is kind of like a backhand. It's kind of like a loan shark. I'm trying to kind of leverage reciprocity. I want to give her something so that she feels obligated to give me something. And when she let go of the control of that bag, the control of her life passed from her to this potential predator. And he grabbed the bag and he helped her take it into her apartment, and he closed the door. And then he pulled out the gun, and then he raped her and put on his clothes. And he said, actually, something I forgot. He said before he set the bag down, he's like, "Oh, I'll just help you real quick and be out of here very, very fast, I promise." What was that promise for? Why is he trying to leverage such trust immediately? That's a huge warning sign. And then he repeated the phrase after the rape. He said, "I'm just going to go into the kitchen for a glass of water, I promise." Why is he promising? It's a tactic he's learned to use to secure trust or control of his victim. She doesn't know why she did it, but her intuition, her instinct, her fear told her that when he went over by the bed and closed the window and then walked into the kitchen or towards the kitchen, that she needed to act. And she got up fully or completely undressed and followed him so closely that if she had been breathing, she held her breath, he could have felt it on the back of his neck as he went into the kitchen. And as she slowly left the apartment front door, she could hear him rifling around in one of the drawers in the kitchen. So you can imagine what he was looking for. She quickly moved to one of her adjacent apartments, somebody who she just knew the door would be unlocked. Again, her intuition, and went in and just told him to be quiet. They called the police. So she was seconds away from being murdered. And even though her intuition didn't alert her initially, and all these things had occurred, the predator had been observing her, she was exhibiting prey, she didn't have that healthy paranoia and that distrust, she didn't make a scene. She allowed him to interview her and take her into her apartment, and then once he was there, he had opportunity because of the isolation. So if you look at that triangle, and then you compare it to what intuition did to save her life, you realize that she knew everything that she needed to know. She just didn't trust it, you know. So that's an interesting case. So moving on to the last stage, that's what I call the scary stuff. I wanted to include this so that later on people looking at this, I think a lot of people want a checklist from experts. What can I do to get my home safer? What can I do to be safer around my car? What can I do to be safer when I'm on foot? But honestly, all this stuff, you're not going to remember all this in general. Read it over and make taking simple precautions a habit. I think most of us do to some degree, but it's very easy to let your guard down and not look under your car, not scan the parking lot and see who's sitting in their car, and not pay attention. And it's definitely easy for us to ignore our intuition. Imagine working late in the office, and you're on the 10th floor, and you know, a young woman's working late at night. She's on the 10th floor. She's got to take the elevator down to the parking garage, and there's a guy in the elevator. She looks, and for some reason, she's got the creeps. She's just, her intuition is alerted. But what does she tell herself? The enemy of intuition is denial. You know that old joke that denial isn't just a river in Egypt? You know, the idea is that in her head she's saying, oh, this is 2015, I'm a modern woman, I have nothing to be afraid of. But she's getting into a locked steel cage, almost soundproof, with somebody who's alerted her intuition. And if she'd been trained to think that way, she would have easily waited for the next elevator, right? You guys see how that just thinking of simple precautions, avoiding isolation, it avoids the potential. It avoids the opportunity. Most of these prevention strategies are avoiding isolation. There's things you can do to make your home a more difficult target. Remember that triangle. Be a hard target. Don't be a victim. Look around you, be aware, make yourself less difficult, or make yourself more difficult to attack, I should say. You know, the more physically in shape you are, the more alert you are, the more attitude you have. It's okay to be rude sometimes, especially if somebody's acting unusual. So what do you do for your car? Keep it maintained so you don't run out of gas, especially loved ones in your family. Teach them how to change a tire on their own. Keep the tires maintained, the battery. Keys out and ready are good. I don't think you need to put them between your knuckles like you're Wolverine ready to fight. I think sometimes that shows fear. But, you know, it's not a bad idea to have your keys out and ready. And here's the thing, when I teach groups of men and women, I've done this before. I've gone to the whiteboard and I've said, all right, ladies, what do you do? Usually I start with men. All right, guys, what do you do before you go out on a night of the town for your personal safety? Like you're going out, you're going to have some drinks or whatever. What do you do in order to prepare for that, in order to protect yourself? What do you do for your personal safety? And can you guys imagine some of the things they might say? What do you guys do before you go out? Say you're going out drinking with some friends. What do you do before you go out to protect yourself? Anything? I mean, even if you conceal and carry, you're not allowed to carry in a restaurant or a bar, right? Most places. What usually happens on the whiteboard is I have men, I draw a line, I have women. Men, blank. Women, I get my car keys out. I make sure that I have my pepper spray ready. I tell my friends where I'm at. I make sure that somebody always watches my drink so that nobody puts something in my drink. I make sure my girlfriends are not going to leave me at the party. I make sure my girlfriends are not going to let me go into a room alone down in the basement or at the end of the hall. And this is, you know, for a lot more for people in the dating age, the younger age, but these are the people that we need to educate, our daughters, our young people, and teach them some strategies that they need to know, because that's when they're most vulnerable. And if we can teach them how to listen to their intuition, their fear, the victim's triangle, take some simple safety precautions, you know, what happens is you realize that a lot of women are doing that. And why is that? You know, because there's hundreds of rapes, like, you know, on campus every year. There's thousands nationwide, tens of thousands. Hundreds in Springfield every year, and most of them don't even get reported. So there's a lot of women out there that have a lot of fear, but they haven't necessarily been taught the difference between worry and actual fear. So sometimes when the actual situation starts to occur, they may not be alerted. They might not trust. They may use denial to kind of take away the advantage of fear and intuition as a guardian. But regardless, there's some good common sense stuff here. You know, if you're going jogging, I love headphones. Put it in, but put one in. Maybe keep it low, especially if you're in an area where you realize, wow, there is nobody else around here right now. Let me be a little extra cautious. So, common sense, precautionary tactics. You can read this later if you're interested, but a lot of the stuff's very common sense. So, now we're into the last of the ABCs. A is for awareness and avoidance, using intuition. B is for setting a boundary. So now we're getting physical. Somebody's bothering me. They're getting physically close. If I have an opportunity to start making some noise and drawing attention, I can get my hands up. If I'm not sure if somebody's being aggressive, like road rage situation, I can stand essentially in a boxing stance, but I can hide it. Cops call this Father Murphy. Their hands are out in front. They're ready to defend themselves and cover and protect themselves. Or you can use a thinking stance. If somebody's acting weird, you want to keep them at least 2 steps away so it's not easy for them to grab you, hit you, or surprise you. And you start scanning your environment. That's really hard to do when you're nervous because you get tunnel vision. As adrenaline spikes, your heart rate can go up to 200 beats per minute. Your gross motor skills are about all that's left. Fine motor skill is gone. The idea of being able to poke somebody in the eye is ridiculous. It may happen. There are other physical things you can do that I will discuss in a moment, but you are really in some ways paralyzed. You do not have your full capability to physically defend yourself. So training is key, or practice, even thinking about it is, I'm nervous right now. Where's my nearest exit? Where are the closest people? Can I get to a group of people? Can I run from this person successfully, or are they going to pin me down? Are they trying to force me into a car? I just heard of a rape over at Battlefield Mall, and a lady was walking outside the mall and she was going to her own car, and the guy came out from around another car, forced her into her own car, and then assaulted her there. So if you go back to the victim's triangle, you know, what could have happened? What if she was alert and aware enough that she could have said, hey, what are you doing? Step back. I said back off. And then start, hey, this guy's bothering, you know, start drawing attention. Maybe she could have avoided anything physical. You never know. And again, I don't blame the victim, but I always try to learn from people's survival stories. And she is a survivor, but what do you do? Let's go through this real quick. Never go to crime scene B. We talked about that before. If somebody threatens to put you into a vehicle, fight for your life, because you probably are. That's the time to go for the three main targets: the eyes, the throat, the groin, because you don't need to hit with impact to affect these targets. These are soft tissue targets that cause a lot of pain. You grab and squeeze and twist the throat, the eyes. It's not sexy movie martial arts. It's grab the face, get the thumb in the eye, and get over the squeamishness now, because if you ever have to use it, just deal with it. Remember the woman that was probably going to be raped, you know, in front of her 8-year-old daughter. Remember what she did with that key. She jammed it in the guy's eye. I'm not advocating violence. I abhor it. I hate it. But it's a reality, and if my 5'2" wife ever needed to get away from a 220-pound man, she knows how to stick her thumb all the way in and scrape and pull until the guy, you know, stops and she can get away. It's what we call stun and run. We decide ahead of time to fight back, and that means preparing. If you've never taken a simple self-defense course, male or female, why would a guy need to take a self-defense course? Why? Not so that you can fight the guy in a road rage situation, so that you can teach your wives, girlfriends, daughters, people in your family, young boys too. They need to be able to defend themselves. And remember, the physical ability informs the 90% of the awareness avoidance model that helps you to really be effective. And, you know, if you take, you know, self-defense, you know, and I'll talk to you a little bit about this in a minute. These tactics are very useful at work and in life, because we all confront problems. And a lot of the strategies of martial arts teach you solutions and strategies that give you a tactical advantage. It could be in a business negotiation. You can use a lot of these tactics and concepts in a way that help you perform better in business. Maybe some guy's using the big boy voice, you know, with you at work, and he's trying to intimidate you. You can use some of this training and strategy to avoid that intimidation, to get a sense of confidence and security that you wouldn't have without that preparation and training. Never fight over something that's replaceable. You want my jewelry, you want my wallet, here. And again, I would drop my wallet and run if I could. Running is some people call it run fu, like making a play off of kung fu. Get the heck out of there. Distance is your best friend. If you do have to fight like a wild cat. I've seen 8-pound cats stop 80-pound German shepherds. The shepherd knows it can bite the cat in half, but the cat's saying, you may take me down, you may kill me, but you're going to know you've been in a fight. And that same attitude I think you need to have if you're ever in a fight. And I've seen it before. I've seen very small women. I've seen it on tapes happen in August of this year and last year. We have security footage of a young couple being attacked by 6 assailants. And they fought back. You know, they got pulled to the ground, they got hit, the girl got her ankle broken, the guy got beat up pretty bad, 6 guys, but they fought back. They fought back enough that maybe they prevented themselves from getting stomped in the ground, possibly murdered, who knows, and the guys took off. And amazingly, the cops showed up post-incident, or right during the incident actually, just seconds before the guys left, which is very rare. You're on your own most of the time, but in that situation, the cops were able to show up. But fight like a cat, man. Go for the eyes, go for the throat, go for the groin. You don't have to do fancy spinning elbows, although elbows are a great weapon. Palm strikes, elbows, knees, biting, headbutts, claws are all great. Targets, top 3 primary, eyes, throat, groin. Secondary, solar plexus, hard to hit, small. A lot of people have a lot of armor here with muscle and fat, so that's not always a good target, but if you can hit it, you can take somebody's wind. The shin is good. Anything that causes immediate pain is good, so being able to stomp or kick somebody in the shin is a good technique. Again, the idea is not to knock somebody out, it's to get away. So Stomping the foot is good, using the nose, palm strike to the nose, or even just pressing the nose. You can stop somebody. We do this experiment all the time. I'm 215 pounds, and I walk towards a student that's 90 pounds, and she'll press my nose back and be able to put me on the ground or on the floor, or at least stop me from coming in. If I physically grabbed her, pressing on the nose into the eyes is a great technique for getting somebody off of you, even if they're big. I used it last night in jiu-jitsu class too. So it works in competition martial arts too. Ears are a target. Grandmas know that it can lead you all over the house with an ear. So grabbing somebody by the ear and pulling, you have to get over the squeamishness, and that's something that we've lost in modern society. I think one thing that self-defense training does is, on one level, it's this spiritual practice that's been informed by monks over, hundreds of years of development. On the other side, it is learn to be an animal, learn how to defend against somebody that's behaving like an animal towards you. So it's very hard to match the ferocity of somebody that's grown up, getting beat up their whole life, living a hard life of being, possibly incarcerated and having to fight. You can't match that. But what you can do is train to interrupt their violent attack, to flip the switch so that you go from victim to counter predator, if you will. It's very useful technique. It's not always expected. Learn to use natural weapons, clawing, compression, slaps, knees, elbows. These are physical techniques that I teach in my workshops and training seminars, but they're easy to do. A compression slap is where you cup your hand and you simply learn how to swing and hit somebody on the ear. Boom, you can hit them really hard that way. Again, the idea is stun and run. So somebody grabbing your wrist, pulling you towards a vehicle or a doorway or an alleyway, someplace where isolation gives opportunity, bam, just slapping. And it may not be, great for a guy to slap somebody, but I know some big dudes that have stopped fights with a slap. Because if you slap somebody, I guarantee you would feel my slap if I slapped you. I almost think I could knock somebody out with my slap, but I could definitely rupture the eardrum, break a jaw, put them on the ground. Of course, I'm a big guy, so my slap is essentially my hook punch. And a hook punch is an elbow, and that delivers a tremendous amount of force, but it takes a little bit of practice before you learn how to do that. But also, when you walk around and you're like, hey, in my back pocket, I know how to blind somebody. I know how to interrupt their airway. I can stop somebody from breathing. I can break their jaw. When you're having a conversation with a hostile boss, yeah, it kind of gives you a little bit of confidence, Not that you want to err towards violence, but there's this weird psychological thing that happens. Now, there's a town in Oklahoma that you go in there, and if you don't have a gun, they give you one. And their philosophy is if everybody's armed, everybody's respectful. So I kind of, it's strength through superior firepower kind of an idea, but I still think that physically defending yourself, having that in your back pocket is a good idea. And I just want to check my time, so I'm not going too far over here. Oh, we're right at it, so this is good. I'm at the wrap-up stage. So learning how to execute basic techniques properly under expert supervision and then practicing them is key. It doesn't take a ton, but a little bit can go a long way. Learn to practice under stress. If you decide to use weapons for self-defense, you have to have access to them. They don't do any good in your purse or in your car. You have to have access. I have pepper spray in my car. And somebody, by the way, would have to fight really, really hard to get me out of my vehicle. I am not going to get out for a showdown or a road rage situation. I'm going to drive to a populated area or right to the police station. And if I have my cell phone, I'm definitely going to call. I'm not going to get out to physically confront people. And I'm even wary of helping people on the side of the road. I'll call the cops or try to get them help if somebody's broken down on the side of the road. But I know of people that were going around knocking on doors. A lady would knock on the door and say at like 1 o'clock at night, I have a baby and we ran out of formula. Can you take me to the store? And you look down the road and there's a truck running. So the guy that wants to commit the crime is using the girl to get you out of your house. Most home invasions, the people that make their way inside don't break in. If they do break in, it's usually right through the front door. The best way for them to get in is, right? They confuse and trick us. They play on our emotions. So that's healthy skepticism, that healthy, I guess what we call healthy paranoia. It's using that intuition. If your intuition is alert, it's like, there's something fishy. This person's broken down, but it's weird. There's something weird. If you're getting that feeling, pay attention to it. So if you do want to use weapons, I would say train and train a lot, because anything that uses a weapon can be used against you. This is the final part of my presentation. This is where self-defense becomes not just a way of fighting, but a way of fighting for what you want out of life. These are the invisible enemies. These are the enemies that are more likely to do you in. I could show you crime statistics, and I've told you about quite a bit of stuff today, but really you're not likely to be stabbed to death or murdered or shot to death. You're way more likely to die of heart disease. Your real enemy is not the guy with the knife around the corner, it's the cheeseburger. That's what's going to get you. So practicing in self-defense and martial arts, fitness, anything like that that's going to engage you can help you to be a little bit healthier. It can help you to reduce stress. I know so many people that feel better after doing something like martial arts practice. It's autonomous movement, like dance, yoga, martial arts. It is a type of practice that connects you to your body. And we are such head people. We live in our head. And I'm a fan of rationality. I'm a fan of the Enlightenment. I love philosophy. But some of that has got to remind us to pay attention to our instincts, to live in our body, to lose your mind for an hour, to put your rational mind off to the side and come to your senses and live in the moment and move in the moment and learn how to use your body, learn how to fight, swim, climb. These are important things, I think, or these are things that can give you a sense of confidence and physical connection that transcend a lot of other stressful factors in our life. It can give you a sense of adventure. So these are the things that I identify as some of the major enemies that we face in life. Apathy. We want to counter that with goal setting, inspiration, motivation, physical activity, boredom, learn a new skill, martial arts, dance, yoga, something that teaches body wisdom. I think the cool thing about self-defense is it teaches you body wisdom, but also tactical body wisdom. You can use the motion to help improve your reflexes, to help play sports, but it's also good for your heart, it's good for your cardiovascular, it's good for your strength, but it's also tactical. Should you use it, you're going to have a little bit better skill. And for some people, it can be a lifelong practice, it can be something that changes their life. Stress, huge aspect of our life. Meditation, exercise, all part of martial arts and yoga and those type of practice. Even dance has a form of kind of moving meditation aspect to it. Depression is a big invisible enemy. It affects us. Anxiety, worry, depression, toxic food. It's so easy. Aristotle said that 95% of what you do and who you are is a result of habits. So analyzing these things, being a peaceful warrior of health, and eating like a warrior is a big thing. Addiction is huge in our society. We use addiction because of depression, stress, boredom, and apathy. Addiction isn't usually is more of a symptom, but the underlying cause are these ways of thinking that trap us within our own mind. Sloth, it's easy to get into a sedentary lifestyle. We work really hard, we travel, we have to drive to and from work, so it's easy to get out of the habit of moving your body. Social isolation. I know a lot of people that group fitness is a great way for them to connect to other people. I think one thing that's interesting, if you look at this mortality chart here, we've got heart disease, cancer, lower respiratory disease, there's accidents, then we have stroke, and then we have Alzheimer's. We're not really 100% sure what's going on with Alzheimer's. We're still doing a lot of research. Diabetes. If you look out of these top 10 mortality factors, it's like 70% of them can be at least you can combat them with proper diet, exercise, all this stuff, good rest, diet, exercise, stress management. These are all things that martial arts practice can help fight against, or even basic self-defense, reduce your stress. So in summation of everything that I talked about today, I want to look at self-defense as not just defense against potential attackers. I want to look at it as self-defense against apathy, boredom, worry, stress. We have an opportunity in our lives to experience a lifelong practice of physical training that can help us to combat some of the worst enemies that we're going to face. And if we look at using intuition as not just kind of a woo-woo concept, but if we look at it as a gift, as a fear and intuition as a tool, as a guardian, they can guide you to a healthier, happier state of well-being, because you might be getting a gut feeling that this is not the right career path for you and that what you really want to do is something else. So turn that fear, worry, that intuition into fascination. Use intuition to be instructive and explore that. Don't ignore it. Part of your mind is telling you to look at something else. So in summation, We did the ABCs of self-defense. Awareness and avoidance is your 90% strategy. That includes the intuition and fear as a guardian idea. B is for boundary setting. Be verbally and physically able to communicate the message of, hey, close enough, step back, back off, pay attention to your surroundings. Environmental awareness is key. And then should you have to physically fight, go for simple, easy to access targets. And if you want to learn more about that, take a class. Take a class. They say that for women, or what I have statistics on, but women who take a self-defense class are 60% less likely to become a victim. And remember, 4 women, or 1 woman every 4 hours is murdered in this country by their spouse or partner. That's terrible. And is it predictable? Can you see the number of times the cops have shown up at the house? The drinking, the controlling behavior, the type of psychological dominance. Is it a surprise that the murder happens? Or are there pre-incident indicators that would inform your intuition to let you know that we're on a bad course here? And that's something that we need to teach our young people. We need to teach our young men not to act like that, not to control, dominate, and to use women in this way. And we need to teach young women to not stand for it at early stages. And it could be as early as the first time you meet somebody, you say no, and they turn no into a negotiation. So I urge you all to pay attention to your instincts and your intuition. I thank you all for coming and listening to me, and I'll stick around for questions and answer if you guys want. I realize that I may have used all the time, but I appreciate your time. I'm Theron Sturgis, and I'm with Dynamic Edge Martial Arts, so thank you very much.